So just one quick moment of review. You see this pasuk from the book of Yeshayahu in chapter 32, verse 17, that says, and the deed, and this is where we're going to focus, the deed of the righteous, or the righteousness, or the act of righteousness, but the Hebrew word is tzedakah, and again, we are going to take it to its more common understanding of giving tzedakah, is shalom, is peace, and the avoida, which he translates here as the act, but we would translate it as the labor, and that's going to be where we're really going to focus today. The labor of tzedakah is something different than shalom, peace. It is hashgate, which translates really as quiet, and betach, which is certainty, like bitachon, safety, until eternity. So again, the act of tzedakah produces shalom. The avoida of tzedakah, which is this more strenuous, laborious, transformative behavior, gives you something far superior to just shalom. It gives you this hashgate, hashgate and betach. So Maisa gives you shalom, avoida gives you hashgate of betach. This is the pasuk that this letter began with, which we covered last week. So then, again, just to take a few minutes to review, we discussed about the innate conflict between fire and water, between chesed and gevura. Michal, mi kakel, who is there like God, is the angel associated with chesed. Gavriel, the might of God, is the angel associated with gevura. And they ordinarily are in conflict. Either water evaporates when put on fire, or it extinguishes the fire. How do we bring the two together? That's only through the pasuk that we're familiar with, because it's part of the davening. Osei shalom bimreimav. It actually originates in the book of Eov, that Hashem makes peace above. How do we make peace between two oppositional forces? By each one surrendering to something greater than itself. And that results in this transformative activity. And tzedakah is that, because while tzedakah is comprised of the most material, the most limited, the most confined, it also allows for the expression of the most infinite, the most sublime, and the most divine. So here we go. V'hine is serusa de la'ela la'oira gilei ha'ara rabba b'ashpa atzuma hanal. So as we said, in order to bring about peace between chesed and gevura, between limitless generosity and restrictive doling out of appropriate expression, is only through a level that is beyond that, called Osei Shalom Bimromav. He creates peace above. Whereas down here, fire and water are in conflict. Bim Romav, up above, they can be in concert. How do we evoke this greater level? How do we evoke a level where each entity retains its absolute identity and cooperates with what appears to be a mutually exclusive character? How does fire retain its fire and water retains its water? And they still can be fire and water. Meaning, if I tell black, don't be so black, and white, don't be so white, so you have gray. So you water them both down, pardon the pun, and you wind up with a sort of diluted totality. But how can I bring about that water should be water and fire should be fire, and they should still cooperate? That is only through the introduction of this, I'll call it miraculous characteristic of the infinity of Hashem. So what is going to produce this miraculous quality? How are we going to motivate Hashem? Is Sarusa. How are we going to stir Hashem, Dila Ela, up above, that he should express this? He Bersusa de Lasata. So as we know, the common pattern is Hashem acts with us the way we act. much like the Maggid of Mizrich explained the statement in Pirkei Avos that the ledger is open and you can do whatever you want, but eventually, as they say, you got to pay the piper. And how do you pay the piper? So the Pirkei Avos, the Mishnah says, either knowingly or unknowingly. So the Maggid of Mizrich explained, what does it mean knowingly? That we determine our fate. How? So the way that we would treat a person who did that is the way we are treated when we do that. And many metaphoric stories about just exactly that. The person thought he was judging somebody else. Usually he's therefore very harsh, and then he winds up he's judging himself. Classic example in the Torah, in the prophets, is when Nasan the Navi tells David HaMelech about the guy who takes the rich man who takes the poor man's only sheep, and David is all enraged, and he says, well, that's what you did when you took Bathsheba, and so on. Okay, so what can we do specifically to stimulate, to motivate Hashem to act in this non-natural pattern, that is, that water and fire should get along? So the act is b'maisa hatzedakah. That's in the maisa of tzedakah. And remember, as we saw in the pasuk, there are two terms. One is the act of tzedakah, and the other is the avoida of tzedakah. Now, again, if you plug them in to translate, they both come up in the same genre, but they are not exact synonyms. They have subtle differences between them. Vashpas chayim chen v'chesed v'rachamim, and the expression of life and grace and kindness and compassion. Laman l'lesle migamer klum, to one who has nothing of his own. So here's where we have to be cautious. We are concurrently offering kindness, and we are extending it in a manner that is graceful. As we all can understand, sometimes someone does you a favor, like they're doing you a favor, and it's not such a favor. And sometimes someone can do you a favor like you're doing them the favor, and then it becomes chen. Then it becomes, the English translation for that is usually grace. Then it becomes an elevated behavior because I elevate the relationship aspect. Now, what is the ultimate illustration of man da lesle migar mehaklum, someone who, quote, has nothing of his own? That is us. I mean, not us, we're perfect. That is us. Because why does Hashem, quote, owe us anything? Say, well, I did this mitzvah. I mean, Hashem is Hashem. Do we really think that our mitzvah is so impressive? Yes, no, round and round it goes. So too, when I might feel put upon by somebody, and I say, well, why should I help him? What did he ever do for me? This is an upside down perspective. Why should I help him? Because he needs help, and I'm in the position to help. That means it is my obligation. And again, it will not surprise you that outside of the world of Torah, like the Alter Rebbe quotes, it's a Gemara, but we wouldn't know the Gemara except that the Alter Rebbe quotes it, so everyone yells at him. But the Gemara says that that the human character is only to do goodness when it benefits you. It's a miraculously divine characteristic to do a goodness simply because it's for Hashem. That's the opportunity gifted to us with our Nefesh Elokis. So we say, oh, does that mean to say that everybody who does something kind is just gunning for some compliment? No, it could be even, I do it because I think it's a good idea, or feel the gift of giving, etc. It can be very subtle, which thus puts a very hefty demand on us. How are we going to, in fact, fulfill divine kindness? Not just very kindness, divine kindness. That becomes the challenge. Since we have a natural, intuitive kindness, what can we do to fulfill divine kindness? So the Alter Rebbe continues, know ye this, masim shalom pamayo shamayel pamayo shamat. So here the Alter Rebbe a little bit takes us on like a left turn. And instead of speaking about giving gifts of tzedakah to other people, the Alter Rebbe redirects it that it's about that another method of this, I'll just use this word selflessness, but divine selflessness, not selflessness like I'm so nice I shared my cookies. Not that that's in an insignificant manner, but I'm talking here about the attitude more than we are about the behavior. The Alter Rebbe adds that a mechanism of this or an expression of this is when somebody studies Torah lishma. Now, this word lishma it's a toughie to explain. So in Chassidus, it talks a lot about this, meaning I'm doing Torah mitzvahs for Hashem, but it's like a trick question there. I'm doing it for Hashem, like there's still a me characteristic there, and so on. And it's very hard. And again, purely at the human level, you can't get outside of this sense of self. We are trapped within ourself, and therefore our imagination is always going to be trapped within our sense of self. You know, every robot is just a mechanical form of a human being because we are trapped within our own identity. Now, lishma is easier to describe in the opposite. So the opposite, what is called shaloi lishma, that is not lishma, is when a person studies for some ulterior motive, such as I want to get a good grade, I want to get honor, I want everyone to think that I'm smart, whatever it is. So that's a very grotesque or harsh shaloi lishma. Then Chassidus says that there's another sort of intermediate level that doesn't seem so bad, but it's not shaloi lishma. It's not that harsh, but it's not yet lishma. And that is when I do it because this is what I'm supposed to do. This is my obligation. I don't have any questions. Whatever you tell me to do, I do. I'm a devoted servant of Hashem. That's a nice level. It's not harshly self-centered, but it's not yet enough. So what is lishma? Lishma is when I do it purely, the word means for his name, shame. So again, it's a very difficult thing to put into human words because it's not really in the human purview. Maybe, a fireman runs into a fiery building to save someone who set the fire. Maybe that's lishma. Again, everything is subject to corruption. No, he's just doing because it's his job. He's just doing it because he likes the heroism, he gets the adrenaline rush, et cetera, et cetera. It's a very difficult concept to explain because, again, it doesn't exist in the human realm. It only exists in the divine realm, and so words are going to fail us. Why
Rabbi
does that?
I'm sorry. So in that case, then it's not that you just don't want to do it. Because if you don't want to do it, then you're not doing it for you. But that's not just then for the sake of.
That's like that middle level, right? I don't want to do it, but it's my obligation, or I have to, or it's the right thing to do, or I should do it, or I'll feel guilty. So it's very hard, again, in human words, because it's not a human concept, to detail this subtlety. It's just, one of those, if you know, you know, which, is one of the things that they got annoyed about with Chassidus, because we like rules and how many times how many ounces do I have to drink and how many times do I got to take 3 steps back? That's where it satisfies our human need for definition, et cetera, et cetera. And things like lishma and shalei lishma don't fit into those packages. Now, why is it that when a person does this, he learns lishma, so to speak, whatever that is? Why is it that this evokes a shalom and a pamayo shalmayla and a pamayo shalmata? That is, it brings about this peace in both the human realm and in the divine realm, because it is a human expression of a divine concept. It is that capacity of the human being to renounce themselves without surrendering themselves. We always talk about this. Hopefully everyone recognizes this idea. It's not about saying, well, I don't care, whatever you say. I mean, that's just being absent. And we're shooting for being present in alignment with Hashem, not about being absent from any sense of my identity. So what is the primary conflict that exists between the human, or I'll call the natural, and the divine or the spiritual, is sense of self. The human's most basic element is his own survival. So yes, it becomes grossly distorted and, looking out for number one, and I'm my own best friend. Even in subtleties, it's still about self. And of course, the ultimate essence of the infinity of Hashem is Anoichi, I am God, your God. So those two, they can sort of get along, but not become one. How do they become one? When they surrender that need to hold on to themselves. Why do I feel that need to hold on to my own identity? Because of a fear that if I don't, I'm going to get taken advantage of, harmed, abused, or somehow I'm going to lose out. But if I surrender to Hashem, I'm going to get hurt. So when I overcome that, and I would say when Hashem overcomes that, that is, Hashem surrenders himself, that is, he subjects himself to us by saying, this is why I created the world, and it's really important to me that you do it. And he knows that we might take advantage of that, or we might ignore it, and yet he does it, and we accept that. And it's like somebody shares something with you, and instead of snickering or going around and using it to gain social points by telling everybody else, I cherish that and I honor it. Then I've created shalom. There's a seamlessness, there's a frictionless connection between Hashem and that person. Pamalia Shamayla, what is this Pamalia Shamayla? Pamalia means like a palace. What is that? Heim Hasarim V'Hamidas. Those are what we tend to think of, and again, it's somewhat of a human projection, which is permitted, of this silos, like these lanes of chesed is chesed and gevura is gevura. And as we know, and again, it's not obviously to beat up, or certainly not to beat up on Avraham Avinu, he was chesed. And when he tried his hand at digging wells, which is a gevura characteristic, it didn't go so good. And Yitzchak was gevura, and when he tried his hand at chesed by leaving Eretz Yisrael, it didn't go so good. So that is the sort of tendency. Michal is Michal and Gavriel is Gavriel, and they do what they do, but they cooperate, but they don't really subsume themselves. I mean, it's sort of the difference between, and again, I don't know about music, about four people playing musical instruments concurrently and a band. In the band, they subsume themselves into the greater presence. And especially down here in this world, where in this post-Gan Eden world, where might dominates and authority is the call of the day, it has the strength to compel people, both the physical, do it or we'll beat you into submission, which is what Paro and Hama never understood. Why don't you people just stop doing that? Because we are obviously bigger than you, and we're going to punch you in the nose until you stop doing it, and then we keep doing it. Because it is a world where one man dominates another. That is, it's this endless competitiveness. It's very much represented in Mitzrayim with the pyramids, that everything's on a pyramid and everybody is where they are, hoping to get above. And the only way to get above is to pull someone else down. I still remember there was a man, his name is Dr. Durso. I had him on a Tuesday night once. And he's like a doctor, he's like a real doctor. And years ago, we were talking, and he was asking me what it's like in the Smicha program. And we talked about how you have written tests and oral tests. And he was just trying to make an analogy for his own understanding to what it was like in medical school. And then he said, but you probably don't have that thing where, so apparently, in his experience at least, when they went around with the doctor to teach them, the aspiring doctors, they would present a certain circumstance and they say, "What do you think?" And then one guy would say this, and then the way, I'll use this term, the game was played is it was expected that someone else would jump in and try to disprove the first guy. No, you're wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. And that was considered part of the protocol that they encouraged. These guys are doctors, and instead of encouraging them to get to what's the best treatment, they were encouraging them to win the game. Who was going to top the other guy, and so on. So that's the world we live in. One man quarrels with another man, and there's always, and again, not just fistfights, but also social competitiveness, and so on. As we see, that a person down here in this physical world, who is a microcosm of the world, sometimes, and of course, the Alter Rebbe starts off on the positive, sometimes the good wins in this internal battle that we have between, should I sit on the couch or should I get up and help that person who needs help? And part of me says, I'm going to sit here. And the other part of me, my godly soul, says, get off the couch and help that person. And sometimes the good wins, and sometimes the Alter Rebbe just says the opposite. It doesn't say chas v'shalom. Then shalom ba'olam ades ketz sheyispara atov mi'ara l'darv v'sharshir mekayra makar chaim baruch hu. V'az yispardu kol pali oven v'ruach hatuma yavim min haaretz. And we will essentially, and this is straight out of what we learned so much in the Sefer Shalbeinanim, we are essentially, I don't want to say doomed is the wrong word, but it is essentially our plan now, or our avodah now, that we are going to have this kind of conflict. We're going to have this push me, pull me back and forth. Because remember, in Gan Eden, everything is clear. This is appropriate, this is inappropriate. Once they eat from the tree of knowledge of good mixed with evil, and that's really the key point. It's not good and evil, it's good and evil mixed together. And the intertwining subjects us to having to pick out the good from the evil. That is, not only do we have to have the resilience to only do the good thing, we don't always know what the good thing is. We got to go and tangle with the good mixed together with the bad. And the good and bad are so intertwined that it becomes difficult to pick out the good from the bad. And essentially, that's what we are destined to be engaged in. That's the eternal pursuit. We had it not in the parsha we read yesterday, but the week before, Vayeshev. So Vayeshev means settled. And you remember that Rashi says that Yaakov he desired to dwell in calm. And God says, for you tzaddikim, it's not enough that you'll have calm in Olam Haba. You want calm in this world. And right away, the whole story with Yosef occurs. So Yaakov's life is not very calm. Ever since he disguised himself as his brother, his life has been very uncalm. So the Rebbe explains, what is this that Yaakov wanted? I mean, we don't imagine that Yaakov wanted to laze around in the hammock all day. So what did he want? He wanted a calm where godliness was evident all the time. And that's why Hashem says, isn't it enough that you'll have that in Olam Haba? Meanwhile, we need to do that for the world. So, yes, we touch these, hopefully, from time to time, whether it's Shabbos or when we daven or whatever it may be. And that's good. It's important. And then we have to go out into the world. And in the world, there's all of this intertwining of holy and not so holy. And we have to go and pick out the holy from the not so holy. And wouldn't it be so much nicer if we could just be in calm and quiet and nobody bother me? Yes, it might be very nice. That might be nice and very pleasant and so forth. However, that is not it's not the circumstance yet. This is, again, as we are all recognize, the message that that Mashiach gave to the Baal Shem Tov. When the well springs of your teachings will be spread to the outside. In tandem with the story that Menachem Mendel Haradaka was once told that Mashiach is here. So he jumped up and he ran in the streets and he smelled in the streets and he said, nah, Mashiach is not here. So we ask, why did he have to jump up and run in the streets? Because in his study, Mashiach was here. So wouldn't it be nice? So, and again, as we know, there are many people in the world of Torah that's what they want. Why should I go out anywhere other than this? I want to be in a holy place of Torah. I don't want to go out into that world. It's dirty and filthy. And we say, understood. And then we say, but who's going to go out into that world and find all the godliness and all the holy people that are trapped in that world? So we might say, look, they're welcome to come here. They put up a big sign and say, you're welcome to come here. That is a strategy. But the Rebbe's strategy is we're going to be go-getters. We're not just going to say that they can come here. We're going to go to them. And what are we trying to do? We're trying to find the godliness that gets lost in the forest of Mishigas. And when will we not have to do that anymore? When will we have calm? That's what Mashiach is. Like the Rambam tells us, that Mashiach is not so that then we get to go, we're right, you're wrong. And we get to ride on white horses and so forth, as he describes it. It's that we can be at peace. And what is the conflict of peace? Is the friction between the material and the spiritual. And again, we know our society, people try to numb themselves with more physicality, or people try to numb themselves with more spirituality. Nadav and Avihu, Aaron's two eldest sons, said, I don't want to deal with this anymore. But we're here to deal with it. We don't just get to say, well, I don't want to deal with this anymore. Okay. So what will happen then when Mashiach comes? When we discover the good, that when we say good, we don't mean pleasant, we mean the godliness, Hashem, that is there. So ordinarily, we encounter material things, and we can either see them as their materiality, and we can even pay homage to them, to Hashem, by saying, well, thank you for giving it to me, but now it's mine. Or we can see it in its Kedusha, an example that we're familiar with. The Gemara tells us that the Rabbanan created the pre-eating bracha. Remember that in Torah, there is no obligation to make a bracha before eating, hamotzi and hagafen and so on. That's not in Torah. In Torah, the only mitzvah is to make a bracha after eating, what we call the bracha achrona, benching, and so on. So why did the Rabbanan create the bracha before eating? So the Gemara says that if a person eats without making a bracha, it's as if he has stolen from Hashem. So the common interpretation of that is that if the fruit doesn't belong to me, Hashem made the fruit grow. So what is the compensation that I give to Hashem? Is I say the bracha bori priya eitz. Now I've compensated Hashem, and now I can take the fruit, and now it's my fruit. Chassidus came along and said, no, that's a misunderstanding. First of all, the buyer doesn't set the price; the seller sets the price. So how do we know that that's sufficient? And then what is it saying? It's saying that now this fruit belongs to Hashem. I say the bracha, now it doesn't belong to Hashem anymore, now it belongs to me. So it's Vaita, this tug of war between us. So Chassidus says, when I say a bracha, I become one with Hashem. So just like if a guest comes over, they might say, could I have a glass of water? But your child who lives in your house doesn't ask you for a glass of water. They just take the glass of water because it's theirs, like it's yours. They're not a guest in your house. This is their house. So when we say a bracha, we become so subsumed within the infinity of Hashem that we become one with Hashem. So we're not taking it away from Hashem. The tension is that I am separate from Hashem. When I say the bracha, I become one with Hashem. Me, the fruit, Hashem, it all becomes one. So that is a method through which we constantly bring this awareness, and so we don't have conflict between the infinite and the finite. And this birra, this discovery of the godliness that is hidden in this physical world, by revealing godliness down here in this intensity, like it says, for the world will be filled with the knowledge of God, and God's glory will be revealed. When we say the world will be filled with the knowledge, what we mean is, or what the pasuk means is, that we will be filled with the pursuit of knowing God. That will be our pursuit. So again, there's two ways of looking at it. One is I pursue the knowledge of God so that I can have what I need in my life: direction, purpose, security, good things. But what the Alter Rebbe is saying that we are shooting for, that we're anticipating, is to see is to change our passion to be for the knowledge of God. Now, this pasuk is how the Rambam ends all 14 volumes of his book of law. So just an illustration. The first book, the first law in the whole of the 14 volumes, page 1, law 1 reads that the foundation of all foundations and the pillar of all wisdoms is to know God. To know God. Then it goes on for 14 volumes. And as we are all familiar, sometimes you learn a law in Torah and you really see the godliness. And other times, it's like, what? Why do I need to know how a potter's wheel or a wagon works? And then I understand that whether this spigot or this mechanism can be susceptible. Well, I thought I'm going to find out about God here. What's going on? And that's the point, that when we study about all the laws of commerce and all the laws of Shabbos and all the intricacies of chemical functionality and biology and physics that allow for, or that empower us to discover the God, to function, we are actually picking through the godliness. So then at the very end, when we come through all 14 volumes, the Rambam tells us the world will be filled with the pursuit of the knowledge of God. That's it. This is what we will do. We will find the godliness in all of this seemingly ungodly stuff. So that instead of just seeing a pen as a pen, we'll see it as something that is exclusively for godliness. That's what the world will look like when Mashiach comes. When Mashiach comes, that's what the world will look like. However, for us, where can we find Hashem? Because we got to go and make lunch and go out into a world that's antagonistic to godliness, that diminishes godliness, that mocks godliness, that sees godliness only as it serves himself. Oh, God gives me meaning and purpose and direction and so on. Again, not bad things, but not about God. It's about me. So where can we find these moments? Tefillah, in davening. Oh, shar itim mizumanim. Or, and hopefully you recall this term from much earlier in Tanya, in the Amarim, the Sefer Shalbeininim, these designated times. Just a quick reference that the Alter Rebbe talks about the struggling Beinani. And when does the struggling Beinani discover this level of godliness that's commensurate to the tzaddik where there's no struggle? So the Alter Rebbe says during davening, that's an opportunity, or other iti mizumanim, special designated times. Davening is just a common example because the concept of davening is that I am getting over myself. I mean, at the most fundamental level of davening, I recognize that I am not, quote unquote, independent and self-sufficient. There's a level of godliness that I need to depend on. And other special moments when my neshama gets this boost to the point that it is no longer tied down to the physical world. So these are opportunities for us to have a taste of what Mashiach will look like. To isolate oneself with his master was curious because the word for quarantine is hisbodedus. So during COVID, everyone was in hisbodedus, which was always a cherished Hasidic practice for this sense of isolation. So another opportunity for a person to have this type of conflict-less, friction-less, serenity of the spirit is when he studies Torah if his focus is on the infinity of Hashem. When he studies Torah and he has the sense of alignment with the infinity of Hashem. And what's another example? Tzedakah. So we recognize this. Torah, avoda, give me this chassadah. Torah, tefillah, tzedakah. So Torah study, we can have this type of, I'm calling it calm, spiritual calm, because the person becomes so aligned with the infinity of Hashem that it also becomes a form of discussion with Hashem because it's done lishma. It's not about my analysis, what I think about it. It becomes a discussion. It's like being an active listener. Davening, where we're like the child with the parent. And another mechanism for this is through tzedakah, when it's done in a godly way. Like the example in the Talmud that says that Rebbe Lezer, before he davened, he would give a coin to tzedakah, and then he would turn to Hashem. What's the connection specifically between tzedakah and davening? And another of this is we have in our text that before the davening really starts, we say, I hereby accept upon myself the positive commandment to love my fellow man as myself. What does that have to do with davening? Because again, when it's a proper davening, there's no conflict. The physical is not a conflict with the spiritual. And again, we are familiar with the experience. That person davens, they feel this great lofty level of godliness. And then, they put away the sitter, they go out into the world and bang, they get hit in the nose with all of the mishagas. What happened? Well, because it's very hard to translate that into action. One mechanism for doing that is through tzedakah. So Torah is the engagement of the intellect, davening the engagement of the character or the heart, and tzedakah the engagement of the behavior of the hand. Excuse me. He begins gili harav ashpas hadas vatvuna lizbein begdulas Hashem lohelin mizad dechila b'rechim usichlim k'neida. That this is the expression of the thoughts of Hashem to dispatch, to create, to give birth to love and fear in the seichel. Again, we talked about this. Hopefully this is familiar to everybody. The idea that I understand it to be that way, even if I'm not feeling it that way. I understand that this is something I want to be associated with. And this is something that I fear being detached from. By days and through this, Navar HaToyev Lashem V'nifra Hara, I'm able to discover the godliness in it and detach it from the negative. Now, as we know, for example, in much of Torah, it's not only studying about very, what I'll call pristine subject matters. You have all kinds of violence and thievery and harshness, and it's real difficult. And if a person comes in with I'll call it purely human attitude, they can find a lot of things to be troubled with. I don't like how Avraham did this, and I don't like that Yitzchak did that, and I don't like that God did that, and so on. And we can study Torah, lahavdil, like we study literature. It's not impossible to do that. We could do that. But then it's not really going to be a very godly discussion. And as we might fall into the trap of not really studying Torah, we're just projecting ourselves onto Torah, as opposed to humbling ourselves, bittling ourselves to the Torah. We could fall into the trap of, again, we superimpose ourselves on Torah. So when we pursue for the godliness in Torah, by Dezen Nivara Hatoiv Lashem, like smelting of metals, we get rid of the dross, whatever that is, and we retain the purity of the metal. Well, the same thing is true. Again, you can study government in school, or you can study it in Torah. So it's not just, well, ours is better than ours. No, it's not. Yes, it is. One is the study of a functional society, and the other is godliness communicated to us in the study of a functional society. It happens to be the Chitas of yesterday, where the Alter Rebbe talks about, and it's a pretty radical point, why we learn Torah so much. Because Torah, although it speaks of, or precisely because it speaks of very rigid behavioral practices, what to do with lost items and this type of idea, when we study it as Torah, it becomes the mechanism through which we can be connected with Hashem. Because infinite, while being very exciting, I can't connect to infinite. So how do I connect with Hashem? By the infinite compressing itself into things which I can understand. I understand the laws of lost items. I know what an item is. I know what it means that it's lost, etc., etc. Perish lefi hilulo es Hashem ba'emek hadas lahil dekliv rechimu kach navara toiv v'nifra ra kebiru pirud hasigim mikes v'zav mitzarefakar. So the pasuk compares smelting metal to get rid of the dross and the impurities and so forth to a person praising Hashem. So a person can study Torah, and it remains a human activity. He's a Torah scholar. He's a Torah student. He knows a lot of Torah. And yet, and again, this is sort of really what the Alter Rebbe's whole mission was, that a person is a Torah scholar, and he studies a lot of Torah, and there's no godliness to it. So there were people who were not scholars. They said, look, it's not for me. It's too complicated. It's too hard. I don't have such a high intellectual capacity, and so on. But then, and again, we don't talk about this as much. There were the people who had high intellectual capacity and very scholarly, et cetera, and yet they just didn't feel that there was any connection with the godliness. They were studying and studying and studying, and there was just no sense of godliness to it. There was just complete detachment from anything godly. So what do we have to do? We have to study Torah in the pursuit of being close with Hashem. When we study Torah in the pursuit of godliness, as opposed to what it's going to do for me, and you may recall again, we talked about this in the Sefer Shalbeinim. If I study a secular topic, so this morning I didn't know the capitals of all the states, or I didn't know math. Now I know all the capitals. I have become improved. Whereas when I'm studying the infinity of Hashem, it's not that I've not been improved. I have become subsumed like the bracha on the apple, and I become one with Hashem. So here the Alter Rebbe really lays down a super challenge. The Alter Rebbe says, the way you come out of the factory is, your nature is to be compassionate and actors of kindness. Why? That we come from godliness. We are chesed that overwhelms the din. We are naturally predisposed to kindness. Like the pasuk says, that chesed overrides on those who fear him. This is why the Zohar refers to the neshama as a bas kohen. What is the particular metaphor of bas kohen? So the role of the kohen was to get you out of trouble, right? Aaron loved peace, pursued peace. Aaron is the one who made peace between people and so on. Unlike Moshe, who gives you the rules, Aaron is there for when you break the rules. So the character of the kohen is to be compassionate. The daughter of the Kohen is putting the feminine compassion on the character of Kohen. So it's like a double down on compassion. So look what the Alter Rebbe says here. This is really, I don't want to say harsh is not a fair word, but it's very demanding. So if you do that, that's Maisa tzedakah. That's doing the natural tzedakah. Because we come out of the factory with this compassionate, caring character. So the person says, well, I'm a very nice person. I'm a very sweet person. He's got a hard job, because if that's how he is, so what is he doing to add value? What's the value add that he is bringing to it? It's like being tall. It might be very pleasant or not pleasant, but it's not an accomplishment. You have an added value. So Hashem gives that to you. Or I told this story before, where I have this friend and he would say to somebody, what do you do? And the guy would say whatever his job is. And he would say, no, that's what God does for you. God made you an accountant or a dentist or whatever. But what are you doing? What are you doing with the gifts that have been given to you? So to say, well, I'm a nice person. Okay, so then what have you done? Well, I mean, I'm nice, but that's how you were made. You were made to be nice. If you were made to be nice, what is your contribution to the world? What have you done to do more than just follow the natural trajectory of where it's headed? So that's called Maisa HaTzedakah. And again, hopefully this brings to mind the quote from the book of the Intermediate Man, where the Alter Rebbe talks about the pasuk that says, behold, I have seen, this is from King Solomon in Mishlei, in Proverbs, the difference between the righteous and the wicked, the one who serves God and the one who serves him not. And the Alter Rebbe asks the obvious question, isn't the righteous guy the one who serves God and the wicked guy the one who serves him not? Answer, no. A person can be righteous but not serving God. He's gotten into his groove, he's in his bubble, he's in his lane, whatever it is, and he's doing, and everything he does is good. And he's done, we just had Hanukkah, every day he did a little more than yesterday. But that's predictable. He's not adding value. And to use a simple financial analogy, if I take money and I put it in the bank, I'm going to get whatever the interest rate is. If I'm going to put it in some sort of investment, I don't want to just make what I'm making at the bank, because in the bank, I have less risk. I want there to be unpredictable growth. I want there to be super duper growth, not just predictable growth. Well, the same thing. Hashem takes a part of himself. He invests it in us. And he doesn't just want it back undirtied. He doesn't just want it back to where it was. He wants it to transform the world. Yes.
Sorry if I missed this, but I mean, I was here, but if I didn't understand. Everybody is born, though, inherently with this kind.
Every Jew, that is the neshama. That's how it comes out of the factory.
Because I just,
nature,
sorry, go ahead.
I'm saying the Gemara says the Jew's nature is they're compassionate, humble, and actors of good.
Okay. Because I thought I had learned, but like you're not supposed to judge anyone, right? So let's say you have this
Depends who.
Well, you're not supposed to judge any other Jewish people unless I guess they're doing something that you can actually rebuke them on, and then they'll listen and all of that, I thought.
Well, we judge them to be good. We see a Jew, we say, you want to do mitzvahs. That's what you want to do.
Okay, so say you have like this very wealthy person, but he gives very little tzedakah, right? But he gives tzedakah. But does that mean that he's not actually acting above what?
I'll give you an example.
Or like has like in his heart he doesn't want to give, like for whatever reason, God gave him this struggle. God gives us all our struggles. So
it's commensurate to physical health. I mean, bli ayin hara, poo poo poo. Most people, most babies are born, they work, thank God. Kedai nahara, we understand. So a person is basically a healthy person. So why does the person eat junk food? Why does the person not exercise? And what is the greatest health is to reinstate their natural health, right? So we damage our natural health with cigarettes, with potato chips, with whatever nonsense it is. So we're born with a natural health, and it starts to deteriorate. We get less healthy. So what is our aspiration is to reinstate our natural health. So it is true that everybody is born with natural health. Kanai Nahara, Blian Hara, poo poo poo. And then based on circumstances, whether it's within their control or not, their parents, their society, their culture, that they, again, are raised to eat junk food or be sedentary or whatever it is, and then they wind up damaging that natural health. So in a similar sense, every Jew is born with this predisposition, Rachmanim Bashadim Chasadim, compassionate, humble, and actors of good. But what happens? Society mocks it, their own family situation, etc. Now, again, unless a person is a total sociopath, people don't tend to think that they're not kind, compassionate, and humble. They think they are. Just like everyone thinks they're healthy. I am, okay, I'm not. We make excuses and justifications and so on. So just like it is with physical health, it's similar with spiritual health.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Yes, that clarified it. So if this person who has all this money starts giving like more, then he's just back to where he originally began with what Hashem gave him, and then he has to aspire to be more than that because
Correct. Just like a person has to first get healthy, and then he can worry about becoming an Olympic athlete and so on. He has to reinstate his natural health, and then he can work on something really extreme.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. So if he acts out of this way in generosity, that's just, again, the act of tzedakah. So yes, I mean, it's every day is a miracle, etc. But for a 6-year-old to become 7, we don't consider that to be an extraordinary accomplishment. You know, I saw a joke that says, when you get old, they should, they phrased it sort of like, why is it that we all applaud when a little baby stands up? I should get applause when I stand up, type of thing, right? But we're not impressed anymore. Now you're 75, we're not so impressed. Okay, so that's Maisa Hatzdaka. Kishem Maisa, because the term Maisa, an act, a story, again, it's hard to translate exactly what that word means to capture this nuance. Neufel al davar shekvar nasa means it's already been done. That's what he does. Like the one who does not serve Hashem, the Eved versus the Oived. An Eved is a servant. An Oived is one who is serving, who's doing more than just his natural predisposition. It just happens automatically. You expect it, it happens. There's no effort associated with it. It's constant, consistent, and ongoing. Here also, this characteristic of chesed and rachmanis, and again, rachmanis, it shouldn't be condescending like pity and so on, but empathy, the capacity to align yourself, to feel another person's sadness, to truly bond with them in their challenge. Again, it's imprinted in the neshama of every Jew. It's the way we come out of the factory. So impressive chesed is really challenging. Just a moment, the Rebbe's campaign of the Jewish people's obligation to inform the nations of the world of their relationship with Hashem. So like everything, it always meets with some resistance. So one form of resistance is, what do you mean? We already finished helping all the Jews. Now we can go help the non-Jews. And the Rebbe said, we're not talking about going out and looking for it, but when it comes to you, because everybody meets people in their work, socially, and so on. And then there was a real challenge because one strategy that Jews employed, which you can see now, its failure was, I'll just use the term, you'll pardon me, stupid goyim. That was a very easy very easy strategy for Jews to employ. And maybe in Soviet Russia or in Tsarist Russia with the Cossacks, it worked. Meaning, how are you going to keep Jews Jew? Jewish. You know how many Nobel Prizes Jews win? And Jews are good, and Jews cherish family. I mean, we would never tolerate people to say that about us. I mean, it's the most racist thing you could say. What, do you think Gentiles don't cherish family? You think Gentiles don't cherish academic success? And it's come home to roost because the Jews flooded the universities, and now they're being flooded by the next immigrant nation, the next immigrant culture, and so on. So what's going to be impressive about being Jewish? Jews are good people. Gentiles are good people, and there are Jews who aren't such good people too. And there are Gentiles who are kind and thoughtful and academic and family and so on. Well, now what? So again, we have a natural predisposition. So following through on that natural predisposition is not an accomplishment. You haven't added any value. That's really what the challenge is. So what, in fact, is the difference between a Jew and a Gentile? It's not how many PhDs and Nobel Prizes. It's not intelligence. It's not family. It's about bringing holiness to the world. That's what it's about. And again, just in our last few weeks, we've seen how that strategy just totally backfired on us. It's the story of Hanukkah. We thought, oh, we and the Greeks, we're the same. You know, we have literature, they have literature. We're the same until it's not. Okay. That is because Hashem creates us from the deep breath of himself, and thus he embeds himself in us. So we become absolutely the reflection of the infinity of Hashem. And as the reflection of the infinity of Hashem, we naturally have these characteristics. So what we have to do is dig deep and find the supernatural level. That's the challenge that is brought to us. And again, you can't say, well, look where I've come. It doesn't matter. Yesterday's success is today's starting point. If I'm driving from New York to California and I get to Chicago and I rest, the next morning, Chicago's the starting point. Yesterday was the destination. Now it's the starting point. What is avoida? That requires great effort. Negative nafshay, more than just what his predisposition is. And again, you recall this from much earlier in Tanya, like chapter, 16 or something, where the 15, where the Alter Rebbe talks about the difference between doing good. We're only talking about good, but doing what I've always done. We know this again financially, because if a person gets a good salary in 1970, that same salary is not so good in 2000. What happened? It's the same salary. Well, everything's gotten more expensive. So every day is yesterday's destination. So what does he have to do? He has to do more. How does he do more? By putting aside himself. So just like we don't want the doctor to say, well, that's it. I've done enough of the surgery. I'm done. I don't want to, excuse me. I don't want to do it anymore. You mean you got to take it through to the end? So in tzedakah, it's the simplest, not easy, but it's definitive. Last year I gave 10. This year I give 11. That's it. I've done more. So davening, do I daven more because I daven 5 minutes longer? Maybe, but maybe my davening needs to be more intense, or my study needs to be more about awareness of Hashem. With tzedakah, it's easily mappable. This is what we said, that if it will be only Maisa HaTzedakah, and it won't be avoid, it'll, quote, just be Maisa. And again, not that that's so easy, it's like being healthy. Who gets, Sarah Imenu got to 127 and she had her perfect health all the way through. Because we don't, again, indulgence and misbehaviors and so on. Afal Pikain, Bisus, the Lasatis, Rusudilla Elam, Erigiliar, and Safe Baruchu, Barav, Vashpa, Tsuma, Vanasa Shomim, Rim of Gamma Shamata. So what happens when we do tzedakah, even if it's quote only, and I don't mean to disparage that, the Maisat tzedakah, it still creates peace in this world. Don't think it's not valuable. And it still motivates Hashem to respond in kind and to bring it down here in this world. However, lo yiskala shom v'apir aram yatay v'arais ketz. Believe is managol's canal. But there's still going to be conflict. It's still going to be limited to the human and worldly and physical, spiritual, push me, pull me, tug of war. It's not going to be completely, what's the word I'm looking for, at peace. There's still going to be a physical, spiritual conflict until Mashiach comes. However, however, as we know, if I do what I do, so when I'm done, Olam Haza smacks me in the face again. So I'm davening and I'm doing, but if I'm only going to do what I do, Olam Haza always has the advantage because the whole world is, and all the stimulus of my day is supporting my Olam Haza, not my Olam Haba. I'm not getting constant bombardment for holy, holy, holy. I'm getting constant bombardment for what's in it for me, what's in it for me, what's in it for me. But when we do tzedakah in a way of avodah, Hine masher yikarag begadol my lost moed moed beyis mevatel tivur tzeinei hagufani beiratz and baruchu biskafi sitrachra vazi estal yikar the kuchabrichu kisram rechesh dafke kened. When we go beyond our routine, then we can have some anticipation that we go out into that big ugly world. It won't be so big and ugly, because we'll be able to see the godliness that's there. We'll be able to find the godliness that is contained, that is trapped in all of that mishagas. And what happens? The Ra, that is all of that temptation and all of that sulliness, doesn't have as much of an opportunity to get our attention unless we allow it to. So it's not going to stop knocking on the door. But when we have gone beyond our routine in Torah, Tefillah, Tzedakah, that is Torah Lishma, we talked about that, Tefillah, when it's in alignment with the infinity of Hashem, and Tzedakah beyond our routine, we become absolutely aligned with the infinity of Hashem. That's the second commensurate consequence from the pasuk, that we don't only get shalom, peace, we get hashket, like calm, and betach, and certainty. We have the sense of certainty. Hashket umiloshin sheket al shmorav, the hainish hashmorim the from the gamri min yayin benefel namata legamri. And here the Alter Rebbe gives us the etymology of this word that we just translate as quiet, that it actually means the sifting out of wine. So we get rid of all of that shmutz, like the smelting of the metal. So we only see things as godliness. We've used the example before, it's like an esrog. Now I understand that esrogs also exist independent of the mitzvah, but as far as I'm concerned, I would never know that there was such a thing as an esrog, except because of the mitzvah. So when I see it, I don't say, oh, that's a funny looking lemon. I only see it as the mitzvah. Yes, I know it exists otherwise, but that's irrelevant to me. I would never know, just like some rare fruit that may grow in some bush in Africa. It's not, its only meaning to me is its holiness. So too in acts of tzedakah, the sediment, the imperfections are the material desires for whatever it may be, honor, etc. They become nevar v'nifra mat. They become sifted through, And we rid ourselves of that whole strain of the material world that no longer bombards us with calls for its attention, and thus we are able to cast it aside and retain only the godliness. So again, the world is a combo deal of the physical and the spiritual, and by detaching the physical from the spiritual, we become infinitely aligned with only the spiritual side. Ultimately, that's what Mashiach is. We can touch it when we allow ourselves, or not just allow, we compel ourselves to go beyond just our routine behaviors. All right, let's end the letter. Mr. Shem, next week we'll continue.
Made it so clear.